Part 1, Chapter 1, Section 2, Pawn Promotion. The gain of a pawn is the smallest material advantage that can be obtained in a game, and it is often sufficient to win, even when the pawn is the only remaining unit, apart from the king's. It is essential, speaking generally, that the king should be in front of his pawn with at least one intervening square. If the opposing king is directly in front of the pawn, then the game cannot be won. This can best be explained by the following examples. Example 5. The position is drawn, and the way to proceed is for black to keep the king always directly in front of the pawn, and when it cannot be done, as for instance in this position because of the white king, then the black king must be kept in front of the white king. The play would proceed thus: e3, king e5, king d3, king d5. This is a very important move. Any other move would lose, as will be shown later. As the black king cannot be kept close up to the pawn, it must be brought as far forward as possible, and at the same time in front of the white king. e4 check, king e5, king e3, king e6, king f4, king f6. Again, the same case. As the white king comes up, the black king must be kept in front of it, since it cannot be brought up to the pawn. e5 check, king e6, king e4, king e7, king d5, king d7, e6 check, king e7, king e5, king e8, king d6, king d8. If now white advances the pawn, the black king gets in front of it. e7 check, king e8. And white must either give up the pawn or play king e6, and a stalemate results. If instead of advancing the pawn, white withdraws his king, black brings his king up to the pawn, and when forced to go back, he moves to e8 in front of the pawn, ready to come up again or to move in front of the white king, as before, should the latter advance. The whole mode of procedure is very important, and the student should become thoroughly conversant with its details, for it involves principles to be taken up later on, and because many a beginner has lost identical positions from lack of proper knowledge. At this stage of the book, I cannot lay too much stress on its importance. Example 6. In this position, white wins, as the king is in front of his pawn and there is one intervening square. The method to follow is to advance the king as far as is compatible with the safety of the pawn, and never to advance the pawn until it is essential to its own safety. Thus, king e4, king e6. Black does not allow the white king to advance, therefore white is now compelled to advance his pawn so as to force black to move away. He is then able to advance his own king. e3, king f6, king d5, king e7. If black had played king f5, then white would be forced to advance the pawn to e4, e4 check, since he could not advance his king, king d6, without leaving the black the opportunity to play king e4, winning the pawn. Since he has not done so, it is better for white not to advance the pawn yet, since its own safety does not require it, but to try to bring the king still further forward. Thus, king e5, king d7, king f6, king e8. Now the white pawn is too far back and it may be brought up within protection of the king. e4, king d7. Now it would not do to play king f7 because black would play king d6, and white would have to bring back his king to protect the pawn. Therefore he must continue king e5, king e8. Had he moved anywhere else, example king d8, white could have played king f7, followed by the advance of the pawn to e6, e7, e8, all these squares being protected by the king. As black tries to prevent that, white must now force him to move away, at the same time always keeping the king in front of the pawn. Thus, king e6. e6 would make it a draw, as black would then play king f8, and we would have a position similar to the one explained in connection with example 5. King f8, king d7. King moves and the white pawn advances to e8, becomes a queen, and it is all over. This ending is like the previous one, and for the same reasons should be thoroughly understood before proceeding any further.